Retail service workers of Reddit. What's the best instant karma you've seen happen to a rude customer? Story 1. Worked at a telecom in Canada. I am no longer an employee, thank God. Lady comes in with a broken iPhone, is demanding to get a new one for free. If you don't know, in Canada, the iPhone 6s is going for about $400 up front on a 2-year contract at a minimum $80 plan. She had a good plan, but wanted it for free. She called up our loyalty team in store and spent the next 2 hours screaming at them. Finally, they agree to a deal, and she is getting it for zero. She looks at me and goes, "I do not want a case, and AppleCare is a scam." We work on commission, so this essentially meant I was getting nothing and ruining my numbers. She keeps telling me to hurry up through the setup, and I was trying to get them out of the store with everything transferred over and set up. She grabs the phone and starts marching off, saying I was a terrible employee. She gets 3 steps out of the store and drops the phone. Shattered screen and white screen of death. She ran back in asking what I can do. I shrug and went, "Sorry, but AppleCare sure would have helped, eh?" Edit. The cell phone dream got me gold. Thank you, kind stranger. Story 2. As a teenager, I was working part-time at a convenience store. I was being trained by the late-night cashier. This dude comes in and grabs a bunch of cans of vegetables and such, and comes to the counter and stacks the cans in a very specific way, like a weird kind of pyramid on the counter. As the experienced cashier, my trainer, takes each can off the pyramid and rings it up, she reaches the end of the stack, and we realize that the weirdo has his out and has it laying on the counter behind the cans. Without saying a word, the trainer grabs one of the big heavy metal cans of beans and slams it down as hard as she can on the guys. He screamed an incredible scream of searing pain, grabbed his A, and ran out of the store. She to me, calmly, "You get all kinds on the late shift?" Story 3. Standing at the counter of the pizza place I work at. Lady storms in and slams a pizza down on the counter. "This isn't the fucking pizza I ordered. What the are you gonna do about?" she asked. I look at the pizza, then at my buddy Nick, and turn back to her and say, "Nothing." She then goes on a long rant telling how we are going to be fired, how stupid and incompetent we were. She actually told me I must be retarded, then asked why we weren't going to do anything. I said, "Because that pizza came from the pizza shop across the street." I think she actually managed to shrink in size and slink out looking so pathetic and beaten, I almost felt bad for laughing till tears dripped down my face as she slunk off. Story 4. Worked at Best Buy. 10 or so years ago, this happened on Black Friday. Most of the customers were in bad moods since they'd been waiting hours to come in and stand in more lines. But this one lady was raging. After yelling at everyone in my department about how she needed the laptop that was on sale despite it being sold out, she proceeds to tell us she'll have the store closed down because she works with the city and knows the fire marshal, and we have too many people in the store. So she calls him, we tell her to leave, and nothing happens to the store. However, we called them as well to report what she'd said, and she got fired from her job for abuse of power. Story 5. Working the window at McDonald's late night. Guy orders whatever and pulls up to the window. I'm cooking and handling the window, so I wasn't there when the customer pulled up. When I walked up to the window, I didn't see the with trash in his lap. I open the window to take his card, cash, and he throws a bag of trash at me. I take a step back, bothered that I just got trash thrown at me, and I watch his car speed off. I'm pissed, but there's nothing I can do. A couple of seconds later, I hear a small bang of metal on metal. I walk to the lobby and look out the windows. The douchebag slammed into a police cruiser who was about to loop around and use the drive-thru himself. Of course, I also went to tell the officer what just happened inside. Story 6. I work at an auto parts store. This one guy stole some $60 headlights and literally sprinted out the door. We went to look outside to try and get his license plate, just in time to see him speed off, hit a curb, and blow out his tire. Called the cops and got arrested and had to have his car towed. Story 7. More than a few decades ago, I worked at Denny's. I had 2 male customers that decided to dine and dash, got their license plate number and reported it to the cops, and jokingly mentioned that they didn't even tip. Later that night, they got pulled over for DUI. Cops recognized license plate number from the report, brought them both back to the restaurant and forced them to pay the bill. After he was done paying, the cop just stood there and looked at them and said, "Well?" The guy sheepishly handed me my tip. Story 8. Guy comes in and is being a complete, not wanting to show ID to buy beer even though he looked 20 at the oldest, constantly yelling and swearing. He also had parked in the handicap spot, despite not having handicap tags or plates on his car. One of my regular customers, who is a sheriff's deputy, was also in the store, saw how the guy was acting, saw where he was parked, went out, got his ticket book, and wrote the guy a ticket. Guy realized he wasn't getting his beer, went outside, to find he was getting ticketed. I could not stop laughing. Story 9. I worked at a restaurant that was very popular for brunch, and Mother's Day was probably our busiest day of the year. I had a customer call the evening before and asked for a table for 6, and he was incredibly rude when I informed him that this would simply be an impossibility. He kept getting more and more worked up, asking me to speak to my manager. At first, I didn't want to pass the phone over. My manager wasn't the nicest guy, and we were in the middle of a busy dinner shift. But my manager came up behind me and demanded to know why I had been on the phone for so long. I was like, this customer isn't going to listen to me anyways, and gave the phone to Mac. Mac asked how he could help, listened for about 15 seconds before telling this dude something like, "So you're tying up my hostess in the middle of dinner even though she's already told you nicely that we can't fit you and your family in the night before our busiest day of the year? Fuck your buddy," and hung up the phone. Story 10. Currently at a consignment shop. We have 2 stories of furniture, and it's only things people bring in for us to sell for some of the profit. A lady came in here with her son, he was 5 or 6, and she looked around. We had 2 bar stools, and she came up to the desk and said, "I'd like to order 2 more of these bar stools." I smiled and said, "We can't do that. Those belong to someone, and that's all they had to consign with us." She looks back and says, "Well, why the can't you order ones like this? I'm sure you can find them online." I clench my teeth and smile again, saying, "Ma'am, we really can't do that. If you'd like to go online, you are more than welcome to look for yourself, but I can't help you and I'm sorry." She huffed and started walking to the door, talking about getting me fired, making a horrible review of this place. She then got a nice big face full of door. It's a push door, and it was locked. She looks at me and screams, "Why the fuck is this locked?" I have no idea. Then her son looks at her and says, "Mommy, you were mean to that lady, and I don't want to go till you say sorry." Best kid ever. Story 11. I'm not sure if being a public defender counts as a retail or service worker, but considering that I provide criminal defense to indigent clients facing deprivation of their rights and freedom, I'll consider it service nonetheless. I was representing a client who was a massive meth head who got high and beat the out of her 8-year-old daughter with a belt after she accidentally broke mommy's meth pipe. She was charged with child cruelty and possession of meth, and, given her criminal record, the DA's plea offer was 3 years of prison. Needless to say, my client didn't want to go to prison for giving that what she deserved, and started freaking out at me when I told her that's the best offer I was going to get from the DA, and it was either accept that offer or go to trial. I further pointed out the mountain of evidence against her, primarily the photographs of her daughter's injuries, the belt that was recovered from her bedroom, the broken meth pipe with meth residue in it, and the fact that her daughter was going to testify against her at trial. After she was done cursing me out, calling me a public pretender, and every other derogatory name she could think of, she fired me and somehow managed to hire a private attorney for the low price of $8,000. I still don't know how she managed to come up with that, but I have plenty of reliable guesses. The private attorney guaranteed her that he could win her case at trial, and that's exactly what she chose to do. Long story short, the private attorney clearly never even read this woman's file before trial. The trial lasted roughly 3 hours. The jury was literally out for only 5 minutes, and the judge sentenced her to 10 years of prison. It was a good day. Story 12. It wasn't the customer, it was the manager. She was awful. She was rude, intentionally picked out favorites and gave them presents in front of everyone, even when they didn't like her and tried to avoid it. Messed up schedules on purpose for people she didn't like, etc., etc. Worst manager ever. So there was a huge storm coming in, and people were really worried about it. Like the news telling people to stay home, other businesses closing, etc. So it was up to her to either keep our store open or close it. Of course, she kept it open. Because schools closed, only half our scheduled employees showed up, the rest called in. And she called her favorites and told them they didn't have to come in. Well, as the 5 of us who showed up were standing there, watching out the front windows, there were 0 customers. She starts yelling at us, threatening to write us all up, etc. And we are like, "No one is here, all the work is done, we are watching the wind. Bend trees over and worried about if we are safe." we'll be able to get home. Right about this time, we hear a super loud crashing noise. Ka-chunk, 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 wham! As the industrial air conditioner on top of the building got blown off, like it rolled along the roof, then went flying into the parking lot. Right onto her car. It was so perfect it was surreal. Dead center, smashed her car flat. Like if she had been in it, she would have died. And it only happened because she parked right up by the building, where we had specifically been told not to park. All our cars were out in the farthest corner of the lot. We later found out that her car wasn't paid off. It was some stupidly expensive BMW or something, and her insurance didn't cover the damage because it was an act of God. Story 13. I worked for an online banking help desk, and this 18-year-old lad phoned up saying he had seen a transaction for $7 to all pay. Net. And because he didn't recognize it, he decided the bank were robbing him of $7, and that I was in on it, and I was a thieving little. Then he gets his dad on the phone who stuck up for his of a son, saying I was a pathetic for stealing $7 off an 18-year-old boy, even though it was a debit card transaction, and I simply worked in the department which helped people use online banking. But anyway, I phoned our debit card services to see if they could give any more information, and boy could they. I then had the pleasure of relaying back to this little, is equally shitty father the following. Hi sir, thanks for holding. I've checked with our debit card services team, and I now understand why your son would not have recognized the payee all pay. Net. That's a deliberately vague term used for discretion when the customer has subscribed to online pornography. That's what it was for. Your son has been paying for online pornography. Would you like to pop him back on the phone so I can tell him it's a payment for his pornography? Or will you pass on the information? The father just muttered that the issue did not require any further investigation, thanked me for looking into it, and hung up. Story 14. Former cell phone industry worker. We have to pitch insurance and a case every time you get a new phone. We have to. You can actually be fired from some carriers for refusing to partake in making these suggestions. During a normal new line setup, this insanely rude woman is hostile about every part of the exchange. Her credit is absolute dog, so she has to pay a gnarly deposit and more of the phone up front, and that's somehow my fault. Finalizing everything before she's completely rung up, I casually offer the same thing I do to literally everyone getting a new phone. Which insurance plan were you interested, and what kinds of cases have you looked at? Apparently that was the most offensive thing she'd ever heard in her life. She immediately raises her voice and makes it really uncomfortable for me because apparently I'm only accusing her of being clumsy since she's black. And I didn't charge her white friend near as much and him just a racist blah blah super fun. I kept my composure and tried calmly explaining everything. Even tried to let her know that I have cared to offer that to everyone and I couldn't get anything across. Eventually, my coworker lets me know he's got this. We swap places and finish each other's sales. As she steps out of the store looking down at the Galaxy Note 3, she had just spent a total of $500-something to get. She trips, eats, and smashes the screen. Comes back in asking for help after raising, and we got to be all awesome. Edit. Thank you for helping me understand why I always fucked up the shrug. Story 15. Working drive-through at a Tim Hortons, and some in a massive black truck parked too far away from the window and expected me to lean super far out to give him his change. He was real impatient and just really rude. I just shook my head, and so he gets all pissed off and finally gets out of the truck and the door shut behind him. It was locked, and he sat there for like 15 minutes and we had to call a tow truck. Sure, it pissed off everyone behind him, but at least they were all pissed off at him and not us. He acted like it was the biggest embarrassment of his life. Story 16. Warehouse worker here. Customers have to show a card to shop, and even though we're not technically a grocery store, we don't allow pets. One dude tried to power walk past the employee at the entrance door, holding a big pit bull puppy on a leash. We stopped him and told him he couldn't bring his dog inside and he lost it. He's our best customer and he's here 5 times a week and he owns stock, blah, whatever. He demanded to know why we don't allow dogs. We explained how it's a food safety issue, especially with an untrained puppy. At this point, our manager came over and just waved him through. BC no backbone, on customers always right. Well, not even 5 minutes later, this dog squats in the middle of the main aisle and pees, followed by. The man turned so red and dragged the dog towards the exit, abandoning his groceries. We stopped him and asked him nicely to please clean up after his pup. That's the reason we don't allow them, sir. Story 17. I work at hotel's front desk. One day we had an Armenian guest who was claiming the room was not up to his standards and decided to make a big deal about it the next morning. He was so rude to the point of almost making a coworker cry of desperation because she refused to compensate the night as his argument seemed really fake and invalid. Once he saw he was not going to get nothing back, he threw his receipt on the floor and walked his way out into a very clean glass door that was recently cleaned. His sunglasses broke, causing him a small cut on the upper part of his nose. My coworker and I couldn't stop laughing the second he walked out, even more mad. Story 18. I was a cashier at a grocery store. This guy with a full cart bitched and bullied employees until he was allowed to use my express checkout because he didn't want to wait in the regular lines. And my line only had 2 people in it. As soon as my floor manager allowed him and he had his cart unloaded, a tiny old lady with a walker who could barely stand got in line behind him. Everyone gave him dirty looks. He realized he fucked up and tried to make a joke about it. Dead silence. I hope his saved time was worth being in. Story 19. Lady lays into me for the amount of the bill, called me every bad word in the English language. Says we overbilled her. She requested I go through her order. Come to find out we underbilled her by $1,000 due to a misplaced zero. The silence on the other line was so beautiful. Story 20. I worked in this fancy clothing store in this posh town at the seaside. It was a busy Saturday when suddenly a very pretentious girl walked in with her boyfriend, ignoring us as we graded her, and even giving my colleague a demeaning look. She went on to browse around in the store and eventually took some clothes with her in the changing booth. After a while, I notice a heated conversation arising from the booth between her and her boyfriend. I see the boyfriend running back and forth between the booth and some clothing racks. In the meanwhile, me and my colleague were being chased away by her. She refused any help and didn't leave the booth, as if we were a couple of Ebola patients. So me and my colleague continue working and helping other customers. I was working the register when suddenly the girl turns up next to me, completely pissed off, and she starts ranting about how our store brand really should work on the fitting of our clothes and how we were complete ups. I was completely caught off guard, and right when I wanted to ask her what the exact problem was, I see my colleague looking at the girl while bursting out this horribly loud laugh, tears and all. What had happened was that the girl had taken with her a clothing piece she thought was a strapless dress. Well, it wasn't a dress. It was a skirt. The girl had tried on all sizes and got completely fed up, yelling at us and her boyfriend because the freaking dress won't fit. So she walked out in a crowded store, making a scene with a skirt pulled up to her. I have to admit, after she left, I laughed till crying. Story 21 was working at a restaurant, and there was this family who were extremely trashy and didn't look like they had a lot of money despite ordering a bunch of expensive steaks and drinking a bunch of drinks. They were rude the whole time, treating me like I was their butler or slave. Then asked for a manager to tell the manager that their steaks tasted rotten after they finished, and their drinks didn't taste like they had any alcohol in them. Again, finished. Just trying to get free food. My manager noticed the way they were treating me and knew they were full of and refused to comp their meal like they were demanding. They began yelling and cussing and him and me and ended up trying to leave without paying. Only to have their car not start in the parking lot, and my manager called the police and one of them got arrested for disorderly conduct and drug possession, and the rest ended up walking after having their car towed. Story 22. I used to be a nighttime manager at a pizza place downtown. We were literally around the corner from a direct competitor. They had a carry-out window and offered that service all night. We did not, and closed our doors at 10 hours and only offered delivery service after that. It's worth mentioning we were quite friendly with the local PD, and they frequently sat in our parking lot at night to catch up on paperwork, watch for drunk drivers, etc. One night at about 11:30, I had a woman and a man start banging on our door. I politely but loudly told them through the door, we close, carry out at 10. The woman goes ballistic and starts screaming and hitting the door, while the man just stands there watching, trying to look hard. I ask another employee to keep an eye on me in case the situation escalates, and step out another side door in order to be able to actually converse with them. This woman is absolutely nuclear at this point, screaming, cussing. I let her finish and I inform her that if she called and ordered, it was probably our friendly neighbors with the carry-out window. I get accused of calling her stupid and ask her to check her phone and tell me which number she called. She says, I don't have to. I know I call y'all and you took my order. At this point, I informed her that there is absolutely no way I took a carryout order after we closed carryout. At this point, the man joins in and starts taking a very aggressive posture and tone with me and informs me I better let them in and get their food. I flat out said no. At this point, the man shoves me, and I stumble back about 3 feet. He goes to swing at me and misses, and I kindly repay the favor and connect, knocking him on the ground. At about the same time the woman attempts to rush me, there is a sound of whoop whoop and flashing blue lights behind them. This doesn't stop them from continuing to try to assault me. However, the 2 uniformed police officers that happen to have just pulled in take care of that very quickly. Another squad car shows up. The 2 have been cuffed and placed in the cars. The officers have been given a copy of the security footage, and I asked the officer I'm talking to if, for the sake of curiosity, he could possibly try to convince her to tell him the phone number she called. He walks me back out to the car she's in and somehow convinces her to do this. She recites the number while glaring at me, with so much vitriol and hatred in her voice. Ganek 7272, you stupid fucking honky. I smile at her and inform her, our number is XX3030. We are Domino's. That's the number for Papa John's. That's why 7272 spells out Papa. Story 23. Worked at a gas station some odd years ago, and the week before it had been snowing a lot, so the gas tankers got delayed due to safety reasons. A customer came in a pretty new Mercedes-Benz, something like SLS 400 or something, and wanted the premium gas. I explained to him that the takers are delayed and we currently don't have any premium gasoline and that he could try the next station down the block. He started swearing at me personally like I has control over the gas delivery. He sped off tires screeching only to have his rear tire hit the curb. His rim got fucked up really bad and couldn't drive it. I laughed at him. Story 24. I was waiting at a hotel reception while a young staff member checked me in. A really obnoxious woman flounced over, interrupted what the girl was doing, and proceeded to about the standard of the kettle in her room. She ranted on and on about only having a normal kettle until I told her to wise up and get in line behind me. She shouted that she had been traveling all day and that the room was not a suitable standard. I pointed out it was a fucking airport hotel. We'd all been traveling all day and that she should just get lost. By now, the girl at the desk was blood red and tearful. The woman banged her fist on the desk, demanded to see a manager, and then had a fit of coughing. She promptly shat herself all through her beige trousers. She didn't hang around after that. Story 25. I worked at a Pier 1 Imports as a teenager, outside Birmingham, AL. This was about 20 years ago, and transgender folks weren't on my radar at all. Anyway, it's near Christmas. I'm at the register with a line of customers waiting. There's a woman huffing about something near the end of the line. By the time she gets up to pay, she's being very loud about the customer behind her. It's a man. It's a pervert in a dress. The person behind her was very obviously born a man, but was in fact wearing a dress. It didn't really faze me as much as this woman who was doing her best to shame this person, who looked very hurt and embarrassed. And this lady was doing it while buying Christmas decorations, no less. Anyway, she's trying to convince me how wrong and gross it is, how this person shouldn't be in the store, etc. As she's ranting, I run her credit card. Declined. I try again. Declined. I have rarely in my life experienced the satisfaction as I did at that moment, looking up at her, smiling, and saying that her card had been declined. Her face got red and she really just went off. That's impossible. Try it again. You're doing it wrong. At this point, she has the whole store looking at her. I try again, and very loudly say it is, in fact, declined. She stormed out of there, knocking over a poor Santa statue by the door. I shared a smug grin with the customer behind her. Story 26. Late to the party, but whatever. Back when I worked at a Blockbuster, we'd occasionally deal with thieves. The standard was just to let them go, not endanger employees or customers. One time, this guy grabs some stuff and bolts. My manager runs after and points him out to 2 cops that had parked in our parking lot. They give chase. This guy dodges and weaves through people and traffic. He successfully crosses the street with cops on foot. Desperate to lose them, he jumps down some stairs to gain a lead, but breaks both legs. Story 27. Let me preface my story by saying I work near Baltimore. Yeah. So, I manage a plus-size women's clothing store. We actually get a surprising amount of, let's call them non-traditional customers. Guys who need a dress for a charity show, cross-dressers, gender-fluid people, Transgender women and drag queens aren't unheard of. So a drag queen comes into the store to pick up some shoes they ordered online. They must have been either coming from or going to a show because they were still in full makeup. I get their name, and during our conversation, another customer walks in. I call out a greeting and say something like, "I'll be right with you." I go to the back room, and it takes a minute to go through all the web orders. I find the one I need and am on my way back to the counter when the new customer throws her arm out to stop me from passing. She then says, "I am a new customer, and I've been here for 20 minutes and no one has spoken to me." A. I greeted her when she came in, and B. She had only been in the store for 5 minutes at that point. I resigned myself to groveling. But before I could say anything, the drag queen stomps over, glares at the customer, and says, "Bitch," she said, "hello to you," complete with finger snaps. The queen then made a big show of thanking me for getting her package and gave me a big sparkly kiss on the cheek before she left. The other customer sheepishly paid for her Spanx and didn't make eye contact when I told her to have a good day. Story 28. This didn't happen with a rude customer, but with a rude coworker. I work in a store with 10 different checkout lines. 2 are express, 2 self-checkout, but only one of which has all the cigarette tobacco products in lockable glass cases behind it, meaning that if you want to buy that stuff, you either go through that line or you go through another line with a cashier, not self-checkout, and ask the cashier to go get you your cigs for you, at which point they go to the cigarette line. Ask the cashier on it to get the smokes, or use their key to get them theirself in case the line isn't open. I have more than a few coworkers who smoke, and they have to buy their cigs the same way as customers do. Employees are not allowed to get out their own cigarettes and check them out themselves. They have to have another cashier ring them up for them. So one day, early morning, I'm working the checkout with the tobacco behind it, and I notice this woman who works as janitor stalker hovering around behind me near the cigarettes. I know she isn't supposed to be near there, so I ask her, "Can I help you with something?" She tells me that she just wants to get some smokes, and I'm like, "Okay, no. If you want cigarettes, you have to get in line and buy some that way, like everyone does." She gets pissed and asks me why I won't just let her get her own cigarettes, and I tell her again that I can sell her whatever she wants if she'll just get in line and pay for them. She huffs, rolls her eyes at me, and storms off. For the rest of the day, she totally has it out for me. Throughout the day, I have other cashiers telling me that she's talking about me in the break room left and right. My manager comes up to me and says that the woman made a complaint that I refused to sell her cigarettes because she's black. I go WTF and explain what actually happened and go on with my job. Then, at one point, there's a big lull in business and I take a quick break, putting on my away light at the register and making sure to lock up the cigarette cases when I go, as is policy. So I can go to the bathroom, and this woman comes out of nowhere and blocks the door, refuses to let me in, and shoves the handle end of her mop into my chest and tells me I'm not allowed to use the bathroom, and some about how I think I'm so much better than her because I'm a cashier and she's a janitor. I'm like, "You realize there are security cameras right in this hallway, right?" And she jumps and takes off again, and I go pee. And this just carries on all day, and she gives me these nasty looks every time she comes by, which is often enough and more than usual that I think she's walking by my register just so she can glare at me. But the day ends and I give my register to someone else and go home. Next day, first thing in the morning, as soon as I get into work, another cashier informs me that the woman was fired late last night because apparently she'd been caught on camera stealing a few packs of cigarettes out of the tobacco case. When the cashier who relieved me at the register eventually took a break herself but didn't lock the cases up. The cashier who didn't lock up got a warning but didn't lose her job. Story 29. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had this one customer that had either put something on reserve or had special ordered. I remember them getting really rude because I couldn't find it and asked them multiple times what the name was. It eventually turned out that it was placed under her husband's name, so it wasn't my fault I couldn't find it at all. She didn't apologize or anything, so it felt really nice when I swiped her card and it was declined. She felt so embarrassed and just stormed off. Story 30. Used to work at Target. We were always told if a parent has their kid standing in the cart, we should ask the parent to have their kid sit down. Most of the time, the parents are fine with it. This one lady was not having it. She was outside and just put her kid in the cart. At the entrance, the ground had shifted a bit, and there was a small lip to get into the store. And of course, the kid is standing at the very front of the cart. I politely warned the customer of the lip, and the kid should sit down because there's a very high chance he'll fall out. She tells me, "Go yourself. You can give me advice about my kid when you become a parent yourself," while pointing her finger at me. All right, whatever. We can't do anything after that. She walks towards the door, kid still standing, and hits the lip. Kid flips out of the cart and bashes his face on the floor. If anyone knows about the carpeting in the entrance vestibules, it's basically like having a piece of paper draped over a slab of concrete. There's no padding whatsoever. Kid had giant lump on his forehead and must have hit his nose too since he was bleeding everywhere. I told my managers and the lady got the help she needed for her kid, but was still being extremely rude. Fuck it. Told you so. Story 31. I used to work at a bank branch. A client was being very disrespectful to a female staff member. Literally 2 minutes later, our bank was robbed at the teller he was using. His 5K was taken right off the counter before it could be negotiated. Eventually, it was covered by the bank, but at the time I can imagine him being worried. Story 32. In Hawaii, at the resort bar, kid that looks about 18. I'd have served him, orders a drink. Barman asks for ID, hands over ID. Sorry, this is expired. Kid loses his, insults the barman, threatens his livelihood, etc. Fast forward 2 days. Sat in the bar at the airport. Same comes in, orders a drink. Lady behind the bar asks for ID, hands over ID. She looks at it and goes to hand it back. I pipe up, check the expiration date. Dick move. But karma is, as they say, a. Story 33. Worked for a sushi bar for a few years. They do a half-price sushi hour most weekdays for dine-in customers. It's a good deal, especially for how high quality the food is. It was an especially busy day, people waiting, etc. This woman and her daughter come in and stress that they are in a hurry. My daughter has cheerleading, but want the half price. Good luck? Full house. But whatever. Customers, Orsham money, yo. So, the lady gets angry when her food takes longer than 15 minutes. She asks if she can get her food to go, which I then explained that the food would then be full-priced. We get into an argument. She's getting angry and beginning to yell at me in front of her embarrassed daughter while I'm meekly standing there, unsure of what to do. Well, I ordered dine-in. You are asking to go, it doesn't matter if you were sitting at a table while asking. She's getting louder and more annoying and I'm starting to panic. My anxiety was really bad at the time, when suddenly my boss chimes in. And by chimes in, I mean she started ripping this woman a new one. You see, my old boss just happened to be working behind the sushi bar that summer. She told the woman to stop yelling at me and that if she wanted her half-price sushi, she would have to sit and wait like everyone else. Boss apologized to the other customers and made sure I was okay. Lady was shocked and now super embarrassed, since the entire restaurant was now judging her. She quietly sat and waited for her sushi. The daughter apologized to me, and that table ended up leaving a good tip. My old boss is the nicest woman in the world. She still gives me free food whenever I go up for some sushi. She also has a bunch of regulars who she always makes time for. But don't her off, because she will become a scary, scary person in mere seconds.